Okay, good day guys, welcome back to the Connect Corner channel, and today we will be rebuilding the carburetors on my 1983 Gl1100. We will be replacing all of the gaskets with original Honda parts, so that is the part number there. You will need 4 of these, 1 per carb. And these don't include any jets, but they're basically all the seals, parts for the top of the slide, the air seal where the carbs mount to the plenum, and as well as the float bowl gaskets and the seal for the pilot screws. So it is a full-on kit, and let me tell you, they were expensive. Like, just these 4 were about $200, but I've seen other kits online where they're like aftermarket parts, and Honda's very specific with their O-rings. Like they're designed to be, you know, like 5.2 mil, where like standard O-ring kits are 5 or, you know, 5.5, just like the ones I have here. So this is just your standard kind of O-ring kit, and these are great, don't get me wrong, like they're great for some applications, but when the Honda spec requires, you know, a gasket that's 5.3 and this is 5.5 or 5, these aren't going to fit, this is going to leak. So bite the bullet, buy the Honda rings, and hopefully we won't have any problems here. Okay guys, so these are just some of the tools that I'll be using. I just have a hammer, needle nose pliers, kind of more of a side cutter pliers. You'll need a 10 mil socket, a ratchet with an extension, and this is a number 3 screwdriver bit, or if you have JIS screwdrivers, that's even better. I have some that are supposed to be coming in the mail. If not, just a screwdriver that you find fits the screws really well, or as best as you can type idea. And a red Robertson screwdriver. I'll show you a trick with that afterwards. I have an impact driver. I highly recommend having one of these doing this so you don't strip the Phillips. We have a caliper gauge, which we'll be measuring our float height with. I have some new cotter pins that I picked up at CT, and then the 4 gaskets in order to rebuild it. So I just wanted to go over what comes in this kit, just so you guys don't get confused with extra O-rings or whatnot. So this is made, all these kits are made to do carburetor 3, so there will be extra O-rings depending on which carburetor that you're working on. So don't think that you missed any or whatnot, because it's just what comes in the kit. So you have the float bowl gasket, the air chamber gasket, which runs in between the plenum and the carb on each carburetor. You have the CV slide for the top, the little air chamber cover, and the top of the slide. And then for gaskets, you have 2 O-rings that hook onto the fuel line on carburetor 3. So down on this fuel line in here, there are 2 O-rings. So you have to take off the bolt here for the actuator pump and pull this off, and there's 2 O-rings in there. So that's what these 2 are for. There is a tiny O-ring, which will be the smallest of them all, which hooks into the pilot screw on the very bottom. So these guys are right there. There's a spring, a washer, a metal washer, and then that O-ring. Then you have 2 O-rings here, which are the fuel seals that run in between the carbs. There's a tiny one and a fat one on each side of the carburetors. Fat one there and a skinny one down here. So these 2 seals are for that small line, and these 2 seals are for the big line. This seal here is the actuator pump seal. So there's an extra one on the float bowl gasket, and it's in carburetor 3. You'll see when you take it apart that there's an extra gasket there which seals the actuator pump. Then you have the washer that the needle sits in. You have the air cutoff chamber gasket. So that's more like a fat washer type I see. You'll see it's more square than round. That's how you know that one. And that's the smallest of them. And then you have two fuel seals that are the same thing. They're more like a square cutoff for the fuel seals. You have the seal for the float bowl on the very end for the drain. And then you have your CV gasket, which goes on the little white guy here. So we'll start by removing the two screws on the top of each of these slide covers. What you're going to see is that you have the slide spring. So be careful not to damage any of these, because these are, you don't really get on them anymore. And then this is your slide, and there's a needle attached to that, so you want to lift it straight up. And there's a little needle, and it's supposed to move like that, so it's not loose or anything. There's a slide cushion in here, which come in these kits to replace. Now you'll notice one side's flat, and the other side kind of has a little lip there. The side with the lip faces upwards. The flat side should face the bottom. So we'll do this with all the slides. Pull them all out. Okay, so now we got to remove some of the linkage here in order to split the carbs. So you need to take out this cotter pin here and remove the throttle linkage to 2 and 4. And then remove, there's, I believe, yeah, 2 cotter pins here. So there's a tiny one here and this one here, and remove that. And then this whole choke assembly stays on 2 and 4. And then you need to remove the cotter pin here from the throttle linkage on carb number 3 in order to get the set of carbs off this side of the plenum. Okay, so with the throttle linkage disconnected, so there's one here, this one up here is disconnected, and then the choke assembly is disconnected here. So now there's 5 bolts on the carburetor in order to split the plenum. So there's one where your choke hook's in, right here. There's one at the very bottom. There's 2 along the bottom here, one here, and one here. And then there's one along the back. Right. Sorry, other side, right here, on the back. Back top. So remove those. And then when you do, there's a little straw that's in here that helps the fuel passage balance out. It's old and plastic and brittle, so be very careful when you split this that you don't just turn the carbs really fast or something. Take it off nice and slow, take it off straight out from each other, and then remove that little piece of straw. Pull it on the choke, and just gently pull it away like that. And you see, this is that straw I was talking about. So make sure you don't lose that, don't damage it. Now we have the carbs split. So now we have the 2 carb bodies split. So I'm going to set 1 and 3 aside for now, and we're going to work on 2 and 4. So there's 4 bolts here. They're all Phillips again. So now, I believe it's this one. Yeah, so this one is really hard to get to. Like if you don't have the proper screwdriver, or if you're like the ratchet doesn't fit down in here, right? Because you can't get it over that. The little tip is a Red Robertson actually fits in these screw heads pretty decently, like better than a Phillips head does. So that'll help you get it loose. Just take put a little slight pressure on it. Take a hammer and just, as you're turning it, give it a couple hits. And there. That type idea. And then your screw will pop loose and you can undo it for that tight one. This is where the impact driver really comes in handy. Put it on the screw head. Just like that. So I'll unscrew all these now. So catch-all screen comes off. And then the plenum comes off. So you kind of have to hold these together from now on, otherwise they will fall apart. Nothing's really keeping them together now. So there are the two fuel seals. So there's a seal here, and then a seal here. There's the big air ring seals on both of them. And you'll notice that there's one of these is a small fuel line. The other one is just set, so they could basically take any carburetor when they were assembling the bike and use that carburetor as number 2 or 3 or whatever. So that hole's actually there, but you don't need a gasket there, because if you look closely, there is actually no hole drilled in that, where that one right here has a hole in it, where fuel actually goes through. So just look at the holes there, because there's no sense putting extra gaskets there if you don't need them. Okay, so now we're going to pull these apart. But the first thing you'll notice is the spring falls off here. So that connects right on where you mix the air fuel mixture screws, or the sink screws if you will. So there's a little spring that it basically sits on this flat piece here, like just sits there, and puts pressure up against this nut on here. So don't lose that. All right, then we have our two fuel lines that run in between. There's the one there, and then our tinier fuel line right there. So we'll replace the seals on those. And we're going to replace the seals on our air cutoff valves. Now, a couple taps. And that comes loose. So there is a spring under here, so just put a little pressure on it with your finger as you take the two screws out, so it doesn't go flying. Alright, slowly let it up. So there's the plate cover, a little spring. And the air cutoff valve itself. Inspect these, make sure they're good. I just replaced them, so make sure there's no cracks, they're not worn out. They still, you know, work okay, function. So we have our old seal, which sits right in here. So there's a seal that goes in there, or two screws right there. So we're going to take that tiny seal, and this is the one that I was saying looks more like a washer. It's the tiniest of them all. Alright, so that sits right in there, like that. Okay. And the air cutoff valve goes back in. Spring, so the tiny end goes up, the bigger end goes down. Place our cover back on. Make sure it's centered on the spring. Press down evenly on that. Get our screws started. So you want to do that for all four. Okay, next we have the float bolt. Remove these 3 screws here. Use the impact if you need to. And we'll pop the bolt off. Okay, so that comes off. So there's our old gasket that's been leaking. And there's the rest of the float. So that's our pilot jet, main jet, our actual float. Needle sits down in here. And this is your pilot screw here. Okay guys, that's that extra gasket I was talking about for the actuator pump here. It's on carb number 3. So that's right there that needs to be replaced. And the secondary fuel lines are on number 3 and number 2, I believe. But double check to make sure that that hole is there, because some of them don't have that. So when adjusting the float height on these carbs, the spec on the book says it's 15.5 millimeters in clearance from the float to the carburetor body. And just rock it back until it just kind of lightly touches the float base there. And it just seats, but there's no pressure. And check from there. And you'll see like it's moving just a smidge over, but that's pretty good at 15.5 there. So make sure you tighten these down all equally in order to properly crush the gasket. And then we're going to take off this fuel drainage screw and replace the gasket on that one. For that you'll just need a flat head. So there's the 2 O-rings on the end of the fuel inlet as well that I mentioned. So that hooks onto the carb right in here. And then that hooks onto the actuator with this bolt. So it's washer and then this piece. And then it goes to this piece of the actuator. And then this lock washer. So that has to go right up against the carb body there, and then this goes over that lock washer. And that's how that sits. Okay guys, so it's a couple days later here. I finally got my stuff in the mail, which is great. So I got my new JIS screwdrivers. There's 4 of them there, which is really nice. Makes taking these nuts off a lot easier. But the big one that I got is this set of socket head screw caps. So I'm going to be replacing all these old Phillips head ones that are all worn and stripped out. And instead it's an Allen key head, and they're like the same diameter, size, everything. And I got that, and I got a set of lock washers for it as well. So we'll be changing all those out. There's a few different ones. So all of the gold ones are M6x30, which are what these ones are here. And this kit's actually really nice because it's all an assortment. I just got this on Amazon. And then the other bolts that hold the plenum together, you have M6x25s. I mean, these things are just worn right out. Like, that's what not having these type screwdrivers will do. And so there's 3 M6x25s and there's 2 M6x40s, and they're all the M6 lock washers on them. We'll grab another washer and bolt and pop in here. Snug. Alright, and we'll do the last one here. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing to the other side. Alright, so now we're going to reinstall the plenum gasket. So it only goes on one way, just like that. That's in there now. take our straw that we had that goes in that hole. So you'll see the smaller hole on the gasket, that's where it sits in. And then we're going to take our other half and watch the straw and the choke lines and all the throttle linkage so it's not in the way. And just carefully drop it into place like that. Alright, so one of these goes through with the choke linkage. The other one, which is on the back side. So again, lock washers on all these. They're still M6 lock washers. And then the long one goes in the top on the back here. 3 M6 by 25s. I'd say this is probably the hardest one to get, is this one in the very center. Just because it's hard to get the screwdriver in, but you can see with an Allen head, you know, you can turn that easily. There's lots of clearance here now. It's that easy. I'll snug that one up. Snug up the one on the back here. And I'll take and tighten that one up as well. Alright, so next we'll hook up all the throttle linkage and the choke linkage again, and then she'll be ready to refire. Alright guys, now I am 1,000 times happier having all of these Allen heads on instead of Phillips that are constantly stripping out on me. So we have our one from number 4, which hooks on to the bottom here. Alright, that's that. Our choke linkage hooks on up over here, and our other throttle linkage here. So this one hooks onto this peg. Just kind of push it down and back on like that. Alright, so I'm going to use the needle nose pliers to kind of hold this up and pop this onto the little plastic groove and then push down onto that. Kind of hold that there for a second while we grab all our lock washers here. And we'll take our bigger washer here, one of our other cotter pins, which will hopefully fit. Alright, so that's not going anywhere. Put this throttle linkage back on. So the cotter pins didn't work out, so I just grabbed a chunk of wire from the welder that fits in the hole fine. Like that. So then I'll just bend it kind of in an S shape to keep it from coming out. I hope you guys liked the video on the carb rebuild here for the Gl1100. If you want to know anything else about the carburetors, drop a comment, I'll try and answer that. If you want to see anything coming up on these bikes, drop a comment as well. I'll try and make a video on it if I can. Other than that, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, you know, we'll see you on the road, hopefully soon. Take care, guys.